تعطوني
لترشيح العماد ميشيل عون.
المعارضة السورية هي اللي تحدد من يمثلها.
Good afternoon, you're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Linette Tamim and these are the news trending today. Lebanon's storm is set to intensify in the upcoming hours. Strong winds and a drop in temperature are expected. Justice Minister Ashraf Rifi says he refuses to elect a president issued from the March 8 camp. And thousands are stranded as Storm Jonas hits the U.S. for a second day. The storm that's been hitting Lebanon since last night is set to intensify in the upcoming hours. Voice of Lebanon Radio says the country will witness heavy rain and strong winds which may reach 90 kilometers per hour. Temperatures are expected to drop as snow will fall at altitudes of 1,200 meters and even 700 meters overnight. Concerned ministries and security forces have taken the necessary measures to ensure the safety of the roads in various areas. A number of roads throughout the country have been blocked by snow, and the civil defense has urged the people to exercise caution while driving. The weather is expected to improve on Monday with spots of rain but lower temperatures. Justice Minister Ashraf Rifi says he refuses to elect a president issued from the March 8 camp. Speaking during the commemoration ceremony held for Internal Security Forces Major General Wissam Eid in Deir Ammar, he said a president who is committed to Syria and Iran does not adhere to the principles of the March 14 camp. Wissam Eid, a top communications analyst who worked with the Police Intelligence Bureau, was assassinated in a car bomb on January 25th of 2008. The general manager of the company that oversees the famous Jeita Grotto in Mount Lebanon has been in custody since last night and is being questioned a day after an Egyptian tourist drowned in the Grotto's river. The national news agency reported that Mount Lebanon's general prosecutor, Judge Claude Karam, ordered the arrest of Nabil Haddad, who runs the company Mapas. Haddad says Mina Ashraf fell into the freezing river located in the Grotto's lower basin after scuffling with other members of his tour group. Tourism Minister Michel Faraoun assured that Jeita Grotto will not open to the public until it is 100% safe for visitors after current safety measures being implemented at the natural tourist site were brought to light. Faraoun said his ministry asked for a full report over Jeita Grotto when he took office 2 years ago to resolve the issue. At least 63 people, including 9 children, have died in airstrikes believed to have been carried out by Russian warplanes on a town in eastern Syria. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says the raids on Hasham near the city of Deir ez-Zor were among a series of strikes that also hit 2 other towns in the past 48 hours, killing scores of people. Russian jets have been bombing around Deir ez-Zor as Syrian pro-government forces clash with ISIL fighters who control most of the province. The group has besieged remaining government-held areas of the city since last March and launched new attacks last week. In the basement of a 5-star hotel in the Swiss Alps, armed men are shouting at terrified men and women, rounding them up and putting them in makeshift cells. The Hilton Garden Inn, which sits right across the road from where the world's business elite and politicians are meeting, is an unlikely place for terror and fear. But for the duration of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, this basement is a place where delegates get the chance to experience what refugees go through. Marie Schuster reports. We have to cut this short now as we go live to a break. Delegates at the World Economic Forum get the chance to experience what refugees go through around the world. Mary Schuster reports.
This isn't Afghanistan or Syria, it's Davos, Switzerland, on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum. Delegates have volunteered for a simulation, among them global financiers and politicians. For the next 30 minutes they'll experience exactly what it's like to live as a refugee.
I think I needed it because I've always come in some way with a different persona, which is in the helping mode, and what I've seen has not been, and what I've felt has not been terrifying, and today it's terrifying, and you can't believe that you're living through that even for the amount of time we did.
Participants are plunged into darkness with the deafening noise of bombardments. They're ordered to flee and subjected to police questioning. Organisers also invited former asylum seekers to share their experiences.
When you're discussing what you have not have any clue or experience, it's difficult. But when you had a glimpse of that experience, I guess you would think twice. What does it mean to be a refugee? What does it mean to run away from your home? What does it mean to lose everything?
Threatened with imitation Kalashnikovs while scavenging for a piece of bread, the business elite are forced to hand over their valuables. But when this experiment is over, their lives will go back to normal, unlike those for whom much of this is all too real.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas came out against Palestinian groups he said were encouraging youth to take part in the surge of violence with Israel, which has raised concern of wider escalation a decade after the last Palestinian uprising subsided. Addressing journalists during a news conference, Abbas said, "We support a peaceful national uprising." Hours before, a 13-year-old Palestinian girl was shot dead by an Israeli security guard she tried to stab at a settlement in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. The fatal incident on Saturday followed 2 stabbings inside settlements carried out by Palestinian teenagers this week. Abbas condemned the recent surge of violence and warned that the people involved will be arrested. And still in the Middle East, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he will allow Jewish settlers to return once proper permits are in place. The settlers were evicted by the Israeli army from 2 houses in the West Bank city of Hebron. Israeli settlements in occupied territory deemed illegal by most countries are a fundamental issue in the stalled Israeli-Palestinian peace process, and a factor behind a recent wave of Palestinian stabbing attacks on Israelis. About 80 settlers were removed from Hebron on Friday, a day after Defense Minister Moshe Yaalon withheld his required approval of their occupancy in apartments in a city where tensions between Israelis and Palestinians run high. Since the sudden appearance of the Islamic State, the group has seized headlines with a shocking level of bloodletting and cruelty. 19,000 people have been killed by the extremist group in nearly 2 years. While such savagery might seem senseless to the vast majority of civilized human beings, for IS it is a rational choice. Solange Mouguin tells us more.
They're thought to have been killed around August 2014, but it's taken until now for their remains to be found. On Tuesday, Kurdish authorities said they'd discovered another set of mass graves in northern Iraq's Sinjar province.
Approximately 16 to 17 mass graves were found, but we don't know the exact number of bodies. Some of the mass graves contain 40 bodies, some 20, some 10. We don't have accurate figures.
The bodies are believed to be those of Yazidis, a religious minority persecuted by the Islamic State organization. Hussein should have been one of these bodies. He says he was captured by IS when the group took over Sinjar in August 2014. He refused to convert to Islam, and so
they brought me to this site, and I laid down like this, and they opened fire at us.
Hussein escaped the bullets and was left for dead with the others, but his relatives were not so lucky.
This is my cousin. He was the mayor of the village, and he's from my tribe. These are his glasses. His ID and his mayor's ID were with him, and these are the Kurdish clothes he was wearing.
Hussein says he had other family members killed that day, but because their papers have been removed, he's unable to identify their remains. The Kurdish government recaptured Sinjar at the end of 2014, but it says it'll take at least another 6 months for authorities to start investigating the sites and identifying bodies.
As well as the importance of dealing with these bodies in a decent manner, it's crucial to document deaths and use them against the Islamic State group to show the massacre that they have committed.
A new UN report says 3,500 mainly Yazidi women and children were forced into sexual slavery between the start of 2014 and the end of October 2015.
And still on the issue, mass graves believed to contain the remains of more than 70 members of Iraq's Yazidi minority were discovered east of Sinjar after Kurdish forces claimed victory over Islamic State militants in the area. The insurgents overran Sinjar in northwest Iraq in August of 2014, systematically killing, capturing and enslaving thousands of its Yazidi inhabitants. Bel Lupton has the details.
Violence that has killed a, quote, staggering and outrageous number of people. That's how the United Nations describes the number of violent deaths in Iraq in the past 2 years.
Since January 2014, we have more than 18,000 people killed as a result of the conflict. In addition to more than 3 million people fled their houses, communities, and became internally displaced people.
The report does not take into account individuals who died from lack of food or medicine. Because of the difficulty of corroborating evidence in Islamic State group territories, the UN believes that the 18,802 deaths are a gross underestimation. Relying on survivor testimonies, the report goes into detail about the atrocities committed by the jihadist group.
ISIL in particular has been employing the most gruesome methods to execute people by running bulldozers over them, by burning them alive. In one case, people were put in a cage and the cage was then thrown into the water. People are being murdered for the most obscure of reasons. One imam was killed because he was not praying correctly. There are children who have been abducted by ISIL. We've documented about 800 children who were abducted and then forced to fight.
The report also says that around 3,500 people are currently being held as slaves by the group. Acts of barbarity that for the UN could amount to war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide.
It seems there is no slowing down for one of the biggest blizzards in U.S. history as winter storm Jonas entered its second day. Up to 85 million people lie in the storm's path, which spans the East Coast and Mid-Atlantic, affecting residents from New York to North Carolina. The massive storm has brought several eastern cities to a standstill, effectively shutting down New York and Washington, D.C. Official reports suggest that at least 18 people have been killed nationwide in weather-related incidents, while 11 states have issued states of emergency in the past 48 hours. New York had started enforcing a full travel ban yesterday. But despite strict warnings, however, government officials said they were concerned by the number of residents who continued to leave their homes. Floating illuminated structures and breathtaking light displays over the famed waterways of Venice on a cold Saturday evening marked the opening of the lagoon city's annual carnival. Revelers wearing elaborate masks paraded through the streets at the nighttime spectacle, which kicked off the 2016 edition of one of the world's oldest carnivals. Acrobats performed on pianos suspended on board boats traveling down the canal, and women dressed in medieval costumes waved to the crowds. Tourists from around the world gathered along the banks of the Cannaregio Canal and nearby bridges to watch the spectacle. Check it out.
Sono tutti piedi baschi qua. In faccia.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. Lebanon's storm is set to intensify in the upcoming hours. Strong winds and a drop in temperature are expected. Justice Minister Ashraf Rifi says he refuses to elect a president issued from the March 8 camp. And thousands are stranded as Storm Jonas hits the U.S. for a second day. Those are your top stories for this Sunday. I'm Linda Tamimna. Thank you all for tuning in.
لترشيح العماد ميشيل عون.
المعارضة السورية هي بتحدد من يمثلها.